Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Black Social Capital Podcast. I'm Dr. Theo, sitting here with two of my favorite people, Dr. Aiden Nagonifer and Brandi Junious, and we are going to be talking about Black mental health today and self-care. Can't talk about this topic enough. You may have remembered when we talked about it last season. This is a reminder, got to take care of yourself. So wanted to bring in some professionals that are doing some great things in the space, letting us know what they're doing to support not only the community, but themselves. And so today we have Dr. Aiden Nagonifer, who received her doctorate in clinical psychology from Fuller Theological Seminary, where she studied community psychology and integrated that with Christianity, right? Psychology and Christianity. So faith, mental health practices, getting your therapy on at the same time. We'll learn a little bit more about that. And uh, Miss Brandi Junious, who is the founder and CEO of Beacon of Light Whole Person Wellness. We like holistic things around these parts, right? A certified therapeutic art life coach and director of corporate partnerships at the USC Race and Equity Center. So we got some heavy hitters here today. Really excited to have them both here because they speak not only to some of my experience, but I know many of you have some similar experiences. And so I want to take the time to step back, have each of our guests really say a little bit more about themselves, and we're going to jump right into some questions. So, Dr. O'Donover, can you shed a little bit more light on your practice and how you look at uh, mental health and self care?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. As Theo mentioned, my name is Dr. Aiden Agonifer. I am a licensed clinical psychologist and practice here in the state of California. Currently, I am a faculty member at the University of Southern California. I work with college students primarily, but I did recently launch my own private practice. It's called Aid in Healing, Wellness, and Psychological Services. I figured that I'll be able to provide wonderful services outside of USC. So that's the primary reason why I launched it. The other reason why I launched my private practice was because of the need for BIPOC mental health providers. And so I realized that a lot of people were needing therapy, especially during the pandemic. And so it was just an opportunity to really meet that need. A little bit about my background. I often talk about, intersectionality and what we bring to the table and the various spaces that we exist in. And so I was originally born in Ethiopia, grew up in Texas. So a lot of my formative years was spent in Texas. I attended the University of Texas at Austin and moved to
We
California for
see
my
you got that burnt
degree.
orange on. It's
Yes.
ridiculous.
You got to represent. And so something that I'm really passionate about is really understanding people's experience. When do they feel uplifted and supported, and when are they hurting? And we all do hurt at some point or another. So for me, when I got into the field of psychology, it wasn't just talking about problems. I think we can focus a lot on problems, but also really focusing on people's strengths, people's resiliency. And so in my practice, I really try to focus on holistic wellness and really approaching issues from different angles, not only angles, but also really celebrating people's strengths. And so that's what I do. So thank you for having me.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Appreciate that. And we'll get into a little bit of what do we do for our strong friends and find out if we're the strong friends ourselves in a bit. But Brandi, tell us a little bit more about what you do. I know in the intro I mentioned a little bit about the holistic side of things, but also the fact that you're incorporating art, and I know that art and culture is a big part of the Black community. So tell us how you're starting to navigate art and mental health in what you do as well.
Thanks, Dr. Theo, and thank you for having me. As you mentioned in my bio, I am the Director of Corporate Partnerships for the USC Race and Equity Center. And what I do there is a lot of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And in my work with marginalized folks, I started to realize like a really strong need for healing spaces. Kind of at the same time, I became a certified therapeutic art life coach and really started taking my art practice, which I'm an international artist and I do just art as an artist, but really starting to look at how art can be used as therapy, as a conduit for healing, as a medium for processing emotions. And so I did some training to become a therapeutic art life coach. And so I wanted to merge the two sides of diversity, equity, and inclusion work in healing spaces. And that's where I really formed Beacon of Light Whole Person Wellness. It's a nonprofit that really focuses on how we can use creative therapies and holistic therapies to facilitate healing and the impact that it has on whole person wellness. So, not just your mental health, but your physical health, because we know those are connected, your ability to thrive in the workplace, your ability to thrive in school if you're someone who's still in school. And so, really just taking all of those different worlds and the healing that can come in all of those different spaces and applying it to marginalized folks, whether we're talking about BIPOC folks, if we're talking about the LGBTQIA community, if we're talking about survivors. I work a lot with survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And so taking these different creative healing modalities and understanding it from a trauma-informed and intersectional lens so that we can really facilitate healing for different folks in that wellness space. So thank you for having me again. That's kind of a broad summary of what I do.
Ryan up there clicking buttons, just clicking away. It's really exciting. I think, well, one, I gotta say, I got some of your work in my home. It looks amazing where it is. You also get some artwork in your home, makes you feel good just to look at different pieces. For me, I know that art is a big deal, and it's an outlet for me to escape. People use that in a variety of different ways. But before we go any further, I do want to make sure that we hop into some questions. So I'm going to pose the next question to us. It's going to be a quote from one of my favorite people in the world, the one and only Audre Lorde. And so I'm going to share the quote with folks in just a moment. But if you're watching here today, you'll see it on your screen. So here we go.
This is Black Social Capital.
So, the one and only Audre Lorde talked about how self-care is essential, essential to survival, essential to the existence. And I wanted to ask you all, how does that resonate with you in terms of how you help others navigate in terms of their own well-being? So we'll start with uh, Dr. Aiden, and then we'll pass to Brandi.
This resonates so much. It is actually one of my favorite quotes as well. And so, something that I think quite a bit about in my own personal life, as well as the clients that I get to work with, is that self care is not self indulgence. Self care is not selfish. So, a lot of times people equate self care with those two things, which makes it difficult for people to take care of themselves, especially within the Black community, or I would even dare say BIPOC community. Um, there's always this fight to really understand and integrate self care. And a lot of that comes from our collectivistic values, which is the need to sacrifice oneself or time for someone else, or for the good, for the common good. And so a lot of times I think a lot about, that's its strength in and of itself to be able to sacrifice, to give to others, to stand up for really important causes. But, kind of what's left out when the focus is solely other people or the group that we belong to or our family that we belong to. And so oftentimes I have to educate a lot of my clients about the importance of balance. So too much of anything is going to have a consequence. So can we still give? Can we sacrifice and at the same time care for ourselves? And so um, a lot of the work that I do again with clients is first of all understanding what does self-care even mean to them, because everybody defines it differently. And then from there, it's trying to understand how else would they want to redefine it, right? So there are tons of barriers that get in the way of self-care. So I think a lot about, what are those practical things that do get in the way, and how do we empower people? So sometimes for some people, they don't have the time. Like if you have someone who's working a lot, for example, a single mom who's working a lot, the idea of self-care, you have to get really creative about, how do you incorporate that time? For some people, it's resources. For others, not having that relational support to be able to step out and take a walk. And so I talk a lot about, there are different ways of caring for self, and really defining that with clients and helping them understand, and then also teaching them how to be consistent in the practice of self-care so that it's not just done in some seasons, but that it's a consistent practice that takes place daily.
Perfect, perfect. And what about you, Brandi? How do you navigate the sometimes contradiction that people might see in the idea of taking care of themselves?
Not to necessarily reiterate what Dr. Aiden said, but definitely helping them reframe it and understand that self care is a survival tool. It's not something that's selfish. It's not something that's a treat or a luxury. It's something that's literally essential for survival, especially if we're talking about folks from marginalized communities, folks who don't have a network of care built into their society or the spaces where they operate, where they tend to carry a lot of burdens in the spaces where they operate. They especially need self-care as a survival tool and a survival mechanism. So a lot of the times I do have to start out with reframing for them and saying, no, when we say self-care, we're not talking about a day at the spa. We're not talking about getting your nails done. Those can be a form of self-care, but we're talking about the things that actually nurture you, nurture your spirit, nurture your body, nurture your mind, so that you are rejuvenated and refreshed to be able to continue on in whatever your work is, whether it's being a parent or your job or just, existing in systems that really aren't built for your care and built to nurture you. And so when I'm helping people navigate self-care, I think of it in a couple of ways. One, I talk a lot about building a self-care toolkit. And so sometimes we don't always know when we're going to need self-care. Sometimes something pops up and it triggers us. Sometimes we have a hard day at work. And so you need something that you can go to in that moment that you've already predetermined will help you with self-care that you can go to. So for me, as an example, I like to be warm and cozy. Like that's my vibe. And so like my self-care toolkit has like my little space heater and a fuzzy blanket that's super cozy and a candle that smells really good. And so maybe I don't get to go anywhere. Maybe I don't have anyone to watch my kids, but I can just take a moment, burn my candle, eat something, drink some warm tea or something that soothes me, calms me down, gives me a moment of just care and nurturing for myself. So that's one thing I tell folks. And then I also tell people to think about like phases of self-care. So what can I do on a daily basis that's caring for myself? Those might be small little things. That might be, meditation in the morning or prayer if you're a person who prays. It might be stretching or yoga, something that's gentle with your body. And then you say, well, what does self-care look like on a weekly basis? Maybe something that takes a little bit more time, gives you a little bit more deep nourishment. That can be going on a hike or, meeting up with friends. Sometimes brunch is self-care, with somebody that really just feeds your
Mimosa
soul.
for
And you're
mental health. That's what we're talking
mimosas
about.
self-care. I didn't say that. But no, seriously, like sometimes you just need that, right? If you like to go dancing, maybe you pick a night out of the week where you go dancing with friends or whatever. And then you think about what are bigger self-care things. So maybe monthly or quarterly or, annually, maybe it's a vacation that you save up for. But I think if we break down self-care into small, medium, and large tasks, we don't think, oh, well, I can't afford to go to a spa or I can't afford a massage, so I have no space to care for myself in that way. Like, well, I can, do something small every day or every other day and still fill my cup back up a little bit, little by little. So that's kind of how I help folks navigate.
I think that's interesting, right? One, the idea of filling your cup back up. You can't help anybody else if your cup is empty, right?
Mhm.
I think that's something I remind myself and students I work with, right? They want to be helpful to others and impact the world and all these things, but they're running on E, right? And so you can't really be an impact to your community if you haven't spent some time with yourself, right? And I think uh, the thing that I got from both of you is that sometimes we just have to redefine some of the things that we're already doing, right, and label them as care for ourselves, right. We may be going dancing, we may be going to church, we may be drawing, but that might be something that we just do,
Mhm.
and we're not labeling it as self-care. So when we take those times, we're not thinking of it as an opportunity that we're rejuvenating ourselves. It's just something that we do, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be a key point in just saying I've identified these things that help me in this way or in this moment, whether those are the large, medium, or small that you're talking about. So
Yeah.
really important there. Um, One of the things that I wanted to talk about with both of you, since you all have started your own practices, are helping folks individually, right? I wanted to really talk about what the challenges are uh, uh, in the business of self care, right? And so, wanted to really talk about why. Why you feel that it's important that women of color like yourselves, Black folks, are in the business of self care. Why is that important? And what are some of the challenges you're facing as self care entrepreneurs? Let me try to coin a phrase in the moment. I don't know. Cite me somewhere. But let's start off with you, Brandi, first, and then we'll go to Dr. Adonifer as well.
Thank you. I think I'll I'll speak about the challenges in two buckets. The first bucket of being worthiness, and the second bucket of being messiness. The first challenge of self care is folks not feeling like they're worthy, like especially if we're looking at again marginalized communities, if we're looking at people of color, Black folks, and we're saying you really need self care. I think we've been socialized to feel like we're not worthy of the kind of care that we really need in order to grow, heal from the different things that we've experienced and so forth. And so a lot of times when I'm trying to get people to spend time with themselves for self-care, what I'm battling with them against is their own lack of feeling worthy to take time out. I don't have time, I can't do that, my kids need me, my family needs me, my job needs me, my community needs me, I'm carrying all of these burdens, and I don't feel like I'm as important as all these other things that I have to juggle, so I'm going to neglect myself. And so, that's one of the biggest challenges I see in people even allowing themselves to participate in self care in whatever form, right? And then that's kind of goes back to what you were saying, Dr. Theo, that like sometimes we can just reframe things that we're already doing and say this is actually self care if you go into it with more intentionality and more consistency. This is something you can really build as part of your self care practice. I think the other thing that I'll say in terms of a challenge I see with people really wanting to um, dive deeply into self care is the messiness part of it. What I've noticed in my own personal healing journey and kind of guiding other folks through their healing journey is people want self care to just always look pretty and be shiny and be fun. And sometimes self care is purging. Sometimes self care is really like, going to therapy, even in some senses. And Dr. Aiden can talk about that more, I'm sure, but that's not as much of my space. But really having to like go through hard things and messy things and cry and purge and do shadow work and all of these other things that I think sometimes people are like, I don't want to get into self-care, I don't want to get into healing because I think things are going to come up that maybe I'm not ready to deal with. And so it's kind of walking people through in a pace that feels comfortable for them. um, and I think those are some of the challenges, and then on top of that, just a lot of myths around self-care. I've seen in a lot of different like wellness spaces, a lot of just, buy this and, take this class. And stuff where it's like I feel like the commercialization and like the commodification of healing and wellness and self-care is really distracting from like the good work that some folks are doing. And so I see that to be kind of like a third challenge.
Man, we hit all the buckets. Talk about that. Talk about the good work that folks are doing. That's a perfect lead into Dr. Aiden. You doing some good work. Tell us about the business, right?
Yeah.
There's some dollars and some cents that come along with this whole thing. And I know that you have your own practice, so if you could speak to that as well, right? Like,
Yeah. I will. That was beautifully stated, Brandy. I couldn't agree more with you. That's a nice way of putting it together. I often think about my own journey of self care. So, the first thing I want to say, as a Black woman, it was never modeled for me. So, you can only do what you've seen other people do. And so, I often talk about, again, talking about our collectivistic values when you come from certain cultures or the BIPOC community. For me, what I learned a lot was about sacrificing, right? For everyone. What I learned about was giving back. And so it wasn't, I often say this a lot, it wasn't until grad school because of a health scare that I really started to practice self-care myself and be more intentional with it. So I like the two phrases we're using. One is really redefining. The other part is reconnecting, right? So for some people, maybe they did used to engage in self-care, and for whatever reason they stopped engaging in self-care. So how do we help them reconnect? Whatever those reasons are, we'll help them explore. So I often talk about three layers of self-care or three layers of challenge that get in the way of self-care. One is the personal, and Brandy touched on this, which is our mindset matters. So if we come in, and I think you connected that to worthiness, and for some people it is, they don't feel like they're worthy enough to have time for themselves. But for me, I often see, with clients who really struggle with maybe a form of some kind of anxiety or depression, which are very common. The issue is, you're kind of stuck thinking negatively about things or situations or yourself. And so how do you get out of that cycle? So if someone comes in and says, oh, I'm always busy, right? There's no way I'm going to, take time out away from school or my kids or work to be able to take care of myself. Then you really have to challenge that mindset, but you have to do it gently, right? And so teaching people the art of really questioning even their own automatic thoughts, like, okay, that thought came up. Is it real? Like, let's find the evidence for that. So there's some work that has to be done on the personal level to address the challenge. The next level I'll talk about is society or societal, as Brandy mentioned. So what messages are we hearing out there about self-care, and what gets in the way of that? So whether it's the way it's promoted, right? So for some people, it feels like it's just not possible. It does really feel like it's luxury, right? You have to have money and time, which is in a way a form of luxury for some people. So we really have to help them understand and see how does society influence their decision to take care of themselves. The last part that I know Brandy touched on it in a different way, but that I really want to highlight is the structural and the systemic piece. So when we look at the history of this country and how different groups of people have been impacted, there are real structural and systemic barriers that get in the way of people caring for themselves. So your social identities and where you live matters. So, for example, if we tell people like eating, mindful eating or eating healthy is a form of self care, but they live in an area where that's not even available, that we're not doing them any justice, right? We're actually contributing to the oppression of these group of people. So, I often like to say, it has to be approached from different levels and really educating people and us sharing our own personal journey of self care as well, so that they know it is a journey. It's not a destination, something that you have to work at from time and time again. And sometimes you fall off, but you get right back on to continue this journey of health.
look, I'm gonna just say you fall off all the time. That's the point. You fall off. If you ain't falling off, you're not doing it right.
Yeah,
Um,
that's right.
it is all right. And I think that that's one of the things too. For me, is that um, like self care isn't like a stopping point. It's like a continuous thing. I think for a lot of people, like going to the gym and all that, like they can understand that that's a continuous thing. Like if I don't work out, like I'm a, you know, have these repercussions. But I think it's the reverse for mental health, where it becomes intangible for people, and so it's like I don't even know how to work on it, which is why we're talking today, right? And once I do start working on it, like it does have to be a continuous thing, or you have to have a clear understanding of how to get yourself, back into rhythms where you can get back to spaces where you want to be, right? So um, I think that that's a good lead into, I think one of our last questions, and I'll play a quick video as it comes up, and then read it off for the folks.
This is Black Social Capital.
So the question was, are you the strong friend? If so, how are you taking care of yourself? Right. So uh, I think I'm gonna start with Brandi on this one because I remember when Brandi was sitting at her desk like, Lord, I just can't answer the phone no more. And then she would go home. She'd be making all these pieces of art, and I'll be like, man, that was dope. She's like, I don't know. It's just something I do. And then all of a sudden, after posting a couple times on social, and then she's like, oh, there's coin attached. Now you heard her. I'm an international artist. So quick turnaround, people. That's what I'm talking about. So, Brandi, tell us how art therapy has changed you. Are you the strong friend? Let's get into it.
Yeah, I'm definitely the strong friend. And I have 3 kids, and I had my oldest when I was 20. So my entire adult life, basically, I've been a mom. So it's literally ingrained in my adult personality to be a caregiver, to take care of other people, to see who needs what, to like jump in and fill that need. And I've had, a few different points in time in my life where I've really needed a lot of care for myself, and I've needed some support, and I've never been good at being vocal about it. I've never been good at saying, hey friends, the strong friend needs some support now. Can I get a group circle, or can I get something, like somebody help me, and I'm fortunate to have friends who are able to pick up on me struggling without me having to vocalize it. So that's really been a blessing. But yeah, I tend to be the strong friend. I tend to always look to see how I can tend to others' needs. And sometimes, obviously, that means that I'm not tending to my own. When I started art, I did art as a kid and stuff like that. But when I started art back again, it really was a form of therapy on my healing journey. I had, a lot going on in my life at that time. And so I really needed a way to get out of my head. It was literally just like my brain and my thoughts were going 100 miles an hour, and I literally just needed some kind of way to distract myself from myself for a little while. And there was just like a weekend I didn't have my kids, and I bought a crate for albums and was like, I'm gonna paint an elephant on this crate or something like that. It was just like random. And I like looked up, and hours had passed, and I painted this, elephant on this crate, and I was like, oh, that was chill. Like that actually felt good and nice. And so that's how I really got into art as a form of therapy. And then, going on from there with, painting, and then people being interested in it taking off for me as an artist. But even at its core still today, like I'll tell people, I don't really take commissions unless I really like the project, because for me, it still is therapy. It still is, I paint what's in my heart. I paint what my self needs to express. And then if somebody likes it at the end of the day, they can, have it or buy it or whatever. But it's really been a practice of connecting to the creative source within myself and using that as a way to work through whatever's going on in my head. And it might have been a little escapist at first. I brought more intentionality into that practice so that it wasn't just me trying to escape from my brain. And then my problems were sitting there like twiddling their thumbs, waiting for me to get done. And it's like, hey, girl, welcome
No
back.
problem. Still here. Hey.
We're still here, but actually using it as a way to process and think, and whether it's, what I'm painting is helping me work it out, or just, giving myself a little bit of distance. And so that's one of the main principles that I talk about when I teach therapeutic art, is that it gives you that objective distance. And I use the example of, like, if you've ever had a kid like draw a picture and then they shove it in your face and they're like, look at this picture. And you're like, I can't see, like, back up. I can't see it. It's too close. A lot of the times our problems and our emotions are like that. They're just too close. And we need a way to get them to back up a little bit. And so sometimes when you do creative therapies, it just gives you enough distance from what you're dealing with to actually see it a little bit more clearly and process it. So that's really one of the core things that I talk about in therapeutic art. And that's really one of the main ways that I care for myself. I also write a lot of poetry. For me, it helps get the thoughts out of my head in a way that requires me to be more intentional and thoughtful about my words and my thoughts, because they have to like be on point and rhyme and all the things. So that's definitely another way that I do that. But it's been a journey, and it's also been um, me realizing that if I want self care to actually work, I can't just do it when I'm in crisis mode. I can't wait till I'm stressed out and I'm ready to have a breakdown and I've got anxiety and I'm feeling depressed, or like, my kids just whispering is like making my hair raise on the back of my neck, or like whatever it is. I can't wait till I get to that point to go, oh, maybe I should do self care. I have to do it as a maintenance practice. I have to do it on an ongoing basis. Again, whether it's just small little everyday, stretching or whatever it is, I can't wait until I'm in crisis mode to remember self-care. It's like drinking water. You have to drink water every day is what they tell you, in order to stay hydrated.
Right. Shoot. Um, so much I could go in on that, but I'm gonna let Dr. Aganifer speak to a couple of things. One, I do want to know if you're the strong friend, but two, I want to know if you're the person that says, hey, uh, I do therapy, but I'm not your therapist to your friends, right? Tell them to go get another therapist. So talk about that, being the therapist in a friend group. Are you the strong friend? All that.
Yeah. Good question. I chuckled at this question. So for me, I used to be the strong friend. Every now and then it does come back up. So I talk about things that, return when you're not paying attention. But again, the strong friend comes from that place. Again, how I was raised, being there for others, taking pride in that. And so when I got into the field of psychology, I was very, very quickly reminded that I can't do that every day with clients and then come home and keep pouring out and really emptying my cup. We were talking about the metaphor of an empty cup. And so there were seasons of my life where I felt burnt out, toasted, because all I did was give and all I did was show up for someone else in strength. And so my own process of healing, whether that's going to therapy or whether that's just really needing to sit back and reflect and have others give me feedback, even about how they experience me and how I show up in relationships. Because what tends to happen is when we're the strong friend, we're not vulnerable, right? That means you have to always be strong. No one could really see you when you're not doing well or when you're falling apart. And so that shifted for me. So now I'm very happy to say, I'm very vulnerable with people. I set boundaries. I remember doing a talk a couple of years ago and saying, no is truly a complete sentence. And there's so much freedom and joy I have in saying no. Doesn't mean I don't love people, doesn't mean I don't support them, but I'm connecting with myself to say, not right now, or this is something I just can't help you with, right? I can't cake for everybody and everything. And then at the end of the day, it's like, what's left, right? And so I've been able to really take care of myself by just setting boundaries, becoming, more vulnerable with people in my life, practicing a lot of other self-care strategies like meditating, praying, being in nature, and those sorts of things. Regarding friends and how I navigate friendships and connections in general, because I'm a therapist, you're right. People do tend to pull at me, right? Like, what do you think?
Trying to
I'm
get a
curious
discount. They're
about
trying to get
that.
a discount.
They try to get their free therapy consultation. And so I laugh at them. I think it's very normal. It's very human, especially when somebody has a knowledge in a particular area. Like, oh, I want their input because they're an expert, or they studied this. So I often joke back and I'll say, well, no, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. And so I try to gauge it. There are times when I feel like I can contribute to a conversation because that's the space I'm in, not as an expert, but because I'm your friend and I have thoughts around this topic, right? So differentiating between the professional self and just this is me, my everyday self, and learning to integrate the two. And so people learn to respect that and they leave me alone. So I do the same with family. Like, I'm not a therapist. Go get therapy. I'll help you find therapists out there. So we all laugh about it, but it ends up working out.
That's good stuff. Good stuff. And I think I think that's a good note to start wrapping, right? Is that everyone should go out there and get some therapy of some sort, some kind. So I want to be able to do a couple things. I want to make sure that folks are able to connect with you all, right? So drop us some information, do your 30-second pitch of where we can find you, how we can get in touch with you, all that, and then maybe one or two other resources that you recommend people take a look at, and as some of your go-to options for either art therapy or therapy. I don't know if that's a thing. Therapy. I don't know. I don't know the technical terms of these things. That's why I got experts here, right? So so Brandi, why don't you go first and let us know how we can keep in touch with you and stay connected, and then we'll wrap.
Yeah, thank you. I think the easiest way to get in contact with me, just because my email is overwhelming, is if you want to reach out to me on Instagram. My handle is at brandijunious.art. And I'm really responsive. That's also where I share information on my therapeutic art sessions. So I do offer a free therapeutic art class once a month to the community. It's the first Sunday at 12 p.m. Pacific every month. And so if you do reach out to me on my Instagram page, I'll share information with you on how to join. I think that's a really great resource if you're interested in art therapy. I do it for free on purpose. I've had people, mentors and stuff, say, oh, you can charge for this and do this. I don't want to charge for it, especially for our community. I want things to be accessible. Trauma is free, so should healing spaces, right? Like, and I understand that, like, we all can't offer all of our services for free. I definitely, am hired to do therapeutic art in different spaces, but I did want to create a community space where I can, I call it my love offering to the community. We can just work through some things. So I think that's a really good resource. I don't have a specific therapist, although there's an amazing one here on this podcast that you can reach out to, but I do think that therapy is for everyone. I always tell people, especially in my therapeutic art classes, like, I have a background in psychology and education. I'm a certified therapeutic art life coach. I'm not a therapist. So if things come up, you definitely need to talk to a whole therapist. It's for everybody. It's not just for people who have been in really traumatic situations. So that's what I would say about that.
Awesome. Also, we'll make sure to add your IG info to the links below and all that jazz. Smash the subscribe button. Y'all know what to do. All these things, right? Dr. Agalifer, how can we get in touch with you? And one or two hot off the presses resources that you'd recommend for folks.
Absolutely. So I do have my own website. It's called aidandhealing.com. Or you can look me up on Google. If you just type in my first and last name, my LinkedIn account will come up, or my website. I'm also listed on Therapy for Black Men directory, as well as Christian Therapist directory. So you can go on there, read my bio, learn more about my services. I do provide individual therapy, as well as I do public speaking, as well as consulting. So if you're curious about just really anything around mental health related topics, any support for yourself or loved ones, or Google Media, or you're needing a speaker for an event, I would love to be a part of it. Apart from that, resources that I really love to highlight. I mean, Brandi, it sounds like what you do is so amazing. I want to sign up for your class. I'm like, I'm going to be there because I love art. I think we all have to really, I always say this, we have to really get to know ourselves and really activate parts of our gifts that we just never really got to explore, or just develop some areas that are underdeveloped. So for me, art is one of them. I love music as well. So one thing I always recommend, especially we're still sort of in the pandemic, we're not completely out of it. One area that I've grown in personally is really practicing mindfulness strategies, mindfulness activities. So really spending the time in silence. I think we spend so much time on our phone, on our computer, listening to music, just a lot of noise all around. So any kind of mindfulness activities, I would highly recommend. There are mindfulness classes out there connected to different topics. So one is that. On the opposite side, I feel like a lot of us are finally starting to come outside and kind of connect with people off of a computer screen.
Beyonce told
So,
us too.
yes, because she did. And so, don't break my soul. What I would say is it's really important that we find communities, like in person communities to connect to. So, my personal go to is either I'll go on Instagram or look up different spaces on Meetup or different apps, just so that I'm able to go outside and really connect, with people and have that one-on-one time. For some people, it's going to church. Others is going to brunch. So I would say check out different restaurants, check out different community spaces to feel connected, to take care of yourself in the season.
Awesome. Well, I definitely appreciate both of you being on the show today. Dr. Aiden, I gotta say, I gotta let the people know that you were one of our first interviews, even before we kicked off the podcast itself. You were part of our pilot. We were like, hey, is this thing gonna work? I don't know. Let's have Dr. Aiden on and see. Right. And so thank you for being back to join us. Excited to see where both of you will go next. And as always, y'all know that this is a wrap, and we'll see you on the next. Peace.
We hope you enjoyed today's show. Remember, the way we build social capital is to build self and build others. We are sure you got some notes on your tablet, computer, or even using a pen and paper. Leave us a review, continue the conversation on social media at Black Social Cap, and share the show with someone you know. Until the next episode, stay motivated and rise together.